And you've got your cup of tea.
I've got my cup of tea, yeah. I haven't got as is yours, but I've got
So, why don't you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Okay. I'm Adrian Lambert, and I'm a photographer, and I'm from here, right where I am. I've sort of been around the world a bit, and ended up right back where I started from, in the town where I was actually born.
Right.
Which is, yeah, it's been interesting returning back to the place that you sort of left and didn't think you were ever going to return back to.
And it's called Glossop, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. It sounds like it should have a cake named after it, or something like Eccles has. Do Eccles cakes come from Eccles?
I think they do. I think they do.
Yeah, Glossop should have a tea cake named after it.
And it appeared in Douglas Adams' book, The Meaning of Life, which was a nice little book where it took English town names and gave them dictionary definitions. And I think Glossop is a rogue blob of food that invariably falls from your fork onto your neighbour's highly polished dining table.
That's great. I love it. Do you prefer photographing people, places, or things? What's your...
It kind of depends on what the purpose of, what's the motivation behind it. I don't have a preference, I guess. Yeah. It's about, so things that have been on my mind lately, I suppose, have been things relating to interpersonal relationships and conflicts and such thing. And so I'm driven to photograph people at the moment. There's so much to explore within a portrait, isn't there? Within a person, without sort of working it too much. There's a lot there, and I like that.
Last year, you had a winning photograph in the Journal of Photography portrait.
The British Journal of Photography, the Portrait of England. So every year for the last few years, they invite people to submit images that are ultimately going to describe the state of the country in any given year. And I think so. It's only been going about 5 or 6 years, and I've had a couple in there, which is nice. But this year's was a portrait that came as a result of a project that was just, when the lockdown started. In fact, it was before the lockdown started, and people were starting to voluntarily self-isolate.
Right.
So I started sort of bobbing around on my bike for a bit of exercise. But and I think initially I just sort of asked people on Facebook who wanted to sort of be involved in a photographic project, have a photograph of them, taking their front window, the whole family or whoever, or and lots of people said yes, which was great. So I sort of every night, I think, and the weather was good at the time, March, April 2020. So I'd cycle across town with a little kit on my back or on my bike. And sort of very quickly, I'd arrive at the house, sort of being sensitive towards the sort of COVID situation. And I'd sort of give them a call on the phone. We'd talk over the phone. They'd be inside the house. I'd be outside the house. So I paired up a little bit of something that they'd said with their portrait that would just sort of reveal a little bit more about the, about the situation they were in. It wasn't something so literal. It was just something, a little bit of motion, a little tidbit or something, I suppose.
Staying on people, you've photographed artists, musicians, religious leaders, me. I remember you took my portrait. Let's talk about the band Dutch Uncles, for example.
How
did you get to work with them, and how did you get them all to stay still? They look like a lively bunch.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Oh, they're just the most wonderful bunch of guys.
There's one shot. I think it's Out of Touch in the Wild promo shot where you've got one of the band members levitating in the air. It looks like they're
Yes.
How did you do that? How did you?
Well, I retouched it. It was completely fake, of course. But in order to mess with, it's, when you see photographs that don't seem real, it seems almost obvious now that it's been done in Photoshop. But in the case of that image, I left in so many things that you wouldn't leave in a final sort of picture. You can see the lights, you can see the background, you can see a dirty floor, you can see all these imperfections. So to then retouch that fake thing, he was lying on a box and I retouched the box out from underneath him.
I see.
So, but the whole thing about whether or not you trust the image, there was enough imperfections in there for you to trust it as being honest, I think.
Yeah.
And so the response that, this response that you have that's what people were saying to me all the time. How did you do that? How did you do that?
Ooh,
I did it in Photoshop like everyone else, but I just left enough junk in there so you'd think it was real.
Yeah,
so.
George Uncle's, I don't know, the music is really, it's so infectiously poppy, but it's coming from other places with odd time signatures and some really interesting influences. And I'm really passionate about it. I love the music so much. I really enjoy it. But yeah, so there was a few things that we've done together. One of the things I think that was my favorite was there was for the Record Store Day, there was a cover done of Grace Jones's Slave to the Rhythm, which they worked it up in their way and retitled it Slave to the Atypical Rhythm.
Right.
And we wanted to, so Dan, my friend, who was managing them at the time, came to me and said, we want to do something that kind of, is a bit of an homage to that cover, because it was so such a powerful cover. So we sort of took that rhythmic thing, but we sort of, I guess we jumbled up their faces and we created the rhythms, in the visual way that we did.
Yeah, super.
Yeah. So you have the rhythm thing that's going on in the Grace Jones thing, but there's a sort of the different components of the different individuals to make up the one.
Okay, so
face.
That song.
So it kind of feels and looks like a person in its own right, but it's it's 5 people.
So one of the projects that you did over lockdown was with Scottish poet. I think his name's Stuart A. Patterson, the Gither Project.
Yeah.
Is that the first time you worked in that way, collaborating with an artist from a different genre, creative from a different genre, for example?
Yes, I think, well, yeah, I suppose, in the sense of creating one collaborative kind of thing. Yeah. It was a perfect time as well, because I've been exploring for some time. This thing had been ticking around in my head about the idea of making books. In fact, I've made a book a few years ago and it was kind of okay. And I wanted to sort of get into the idea of like producing books quite quickly and easily. So not going through, the process of publishing, but to actually produce them on a small scale at home, essentially. And then Stuart sort of randomly got in touch. I know he did a poem about Floyd George, and it was George Floyd. George Floyd. I always do that. And it kind of, and it was in Scots, right? And it was like, it's like I had to decode the whole thing. But I'd read Burns poetry and things like that, and you can get some of it without getting too stuck into it. But this, so I got the gist of. I think I got a bit of the gist of what the poem was saying, and I was really, it was a thing that was obviously happening at the time, and it was really a big deal and so I wanted to decipher it. So I started trying to figure out what all this Scots language meant, and what did I do? I think I just contacted Stuart, who I've known for a little while, not closely, but we've had associations over the years. and I said, "Oh, can you help me with this bit? Can you help me with that bit?" And he just loved the idea that I was trying to decode the Scots language.
Yes.
He's a passionate proponent, obviously, of the language, and he's a fantastic poet. But it's really important to him that Scots isn't something that just exists within the border of Scotland. It's that something that it gets out into the wider world. And so, I ended up. He asked me if we could collaborate on a book, and he had this. It kind of all just rolled off his tongue. He had this working title of Together, which is the Scots word for together. And
I thought, isn't
so he just sent me a bunch of poems, and I kind of looked at them and thought, well, I can't, how to sort of make this work. And I was thinking very much about photo books and editing, and sort of how you kind of run a sequence of images and things like that. And I was thinking, what if the photographs and the poetry were sort of working as the sequence as opposed to photographs and photographs. So it was a nice way to sort of, I suppose, elaborate a little bit on the photo book genre.
I have one last question for you. What are you working on now?
My basement, my house.
Getting all the water out the flooded basement.
Yeah, it's. I do feel very much like I'm stuck in between stuff at the moment. All right, no, I have got this project that I haven't started, that I've conceived of, and I'll let you in on it a little bit in terms of the concept. It's kind of about the other town. This is, I guess, what I was talking about when it comes to interpersonal sort of stuff, and it's about the other town. And when you live in a town and you've kind of been there for a long time, as I have in this town. I've been away, but I've come back, so I get the opportunity to go away, come back, and then go, so that's what was going on. You have people say, oh, people from that town, they're this, people from that town, they're that kind of thing. And it could be country, it could be anything, it's just something that people do that is, I'm not very fond of, where they kind of just, say that people are like this and people are like that, and people, So I wanted to take a series of portraits of this other town. And it's going to be a combination of portraits that are genuinely of people who are, distinct and unique sort of personalities that visually appear distinct and unique, and also a mix of people who are role-playing distinct and unique people. And the whole point is that you don't know which is which, and it kind of it's to encourage just a little bit of reflection on the idea of the presumptions that we have about other people, in the other town or whatever. So
that sounds like fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I've still got to fix my basement at the same time. For a long time. That's my print.
Cat, just committed.
Yeah.
I can do it. No, I can't.